Fantastic. So welcome all. Thank you for coming. Whether you're a long established to this 80th event or a newcomer to this, I'm prepared to be you myself. Thank you for coming out. We're really hoping to use you, work with you, learn from you. I'm delighted to partner with Abbe Climate Action. Blueremediomics is a project funded by the EU. There's probably lots of funny things in our slides because we have to have them because the funder gets annoyed if we don't. We've also got some printouts with some more information about the project if people would like to know about that. But very broadly, if this is going to work, here we go. We're exploring the potential of the marine microbiome and the impact on human health. And you can see that more clearly than I have, but we're looking at marine transport, human impact, how this works. As you go a bit more deeply, we see the ocean microbiome, and down there we have plankton. And here I must acknowledge my colleague Marcel Jaspers, who is here. And I describe Marcel's world-leading scholarship as making drugs from plankton. I'm sure he does a lot more than that. But this whole project is broadly about learning more about plankton, taken extremely broadly, making new products, including the physical and the digital manifestations, and how that can be of value for agriculture, for humans, for food, and for nature. And there's lots more information on the slides if you would like to know about that. A bit more here, we're looking at discovery. We're building databases, trying to build an index. There seems to be lots of information which is known, but no one really quite knows and no one can quite find it. So trying to draw that together and then trying to develop products. But I'm really involved in policy and engagement. And I think this is because I was involved, I'm interested in intellectual property, I'm interested in benefit sharing and human rights perspectives in relation to work with technology and the ocean. But I was asked to get involved in this work because I think I work with people and I do words very broadly rather than do science. But all these other people here, if you've got questions about the science. But what I'm really interested in is there's a lot of science going on in the project and related to the project. Some of it's related to blue carbon, some of it's related to aquaculture, for example. And to stereotype, there's a lot of scientists who are terribly excited about the science. This is, of course, not true. Scientists have a much more plural view than that. But we are looking into, there's a view which runs across science, and particularly from the European Union, about the concept of doing no significant harm. One can do research, one can do science, but one must do no significant harm. And this part of the project is really trying to work out what that means. Sorry. Keep going. Okay. What does it mean to do no significant harm? What you might think is that might be very different from what you might think. If one asks scientists, perhaps one's get a particular lens. If one asks people who are very keen on oil, one might get a different lens. If one speaks to psychologists, perhaps younger people, older people, one might get a different lens. So I'm really interested to work out what you think, not necessarily about the science, although really welcome your thoughts on the science, but actually how should we really work out what people think about this? What is no significant harm and who should we ask and how might we get those people in the room? And very, very broadly, when I'm asked about these events, I say I would like to speak to real live people. So I'm really hoping that's what you are, real live people, to let me know what you think. I know many areas would be much more expert in the science, certainly, than I am, but it's really that lens. So if you think, I don't know what she's about to start talking about, please do not worry. The real aim is what you think as a human, how you should become involved in this space. So to contextualize that a little bit, is this going to work? I need to click on the screen. I need to click the mouse on the screen. So again, very broadly, one might think that a lot of scientific activity might be seen as the power of the human. Homo sapiens, we're going in there, we're playing with nature. Now, one can, of course, argue that this has been done to be for the benefit of humanity and indeed for the benefit of nature. But it's perhaps humanity trying to intervene a little bit too much. So we're drilling into this. How can we get to no significant harm? What does it mean? Who says? And not because I'm terribly competitive, but we've done two of these before, one in Galway, one in Barcelona. And at the end, I'm going to share what they said. And I think it'd be really fascinating to see how this ties in with what you have said. But a little bit of science, building on my colleague Chris Byler, first of all. Again, you might know all about this if you do bear with me. But broadly, oceanic phytoplankton, green stuff. mangroves, for example, the equivalent of trees underwater, it performs 50% of photosynthesis on Earth. And this is a really important recycling function that is performed. It is what enables there to be carbon sink, the idea that we can blue carbon, it absorbs carbon, it keeps it under the sea, keeps it away from doing bad things to the environment. I think that's basic enough, but please do ask experts if you would like to know. So this is why people are interested in this. Oh, how do I go the other way now?
It's an arrow.
There's an arrow. Okay, it's working. Absolutely. Excellent. Okay, so that is one definition of it. The definition, thanks to Michelle Stanley, who we wish all the very, very best, draws on the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, which Marcel and I are involved. Blue carbon, the carbon stored in coastal and marine ecosystems. Mangroves, marshes, for example, they sequester and they store carbon, more carbon than the terrestrial forests. And again, this audience perhaps already knows all of this, but when I first started working in this space, there's so much discussion about trees, about paying trees to compensate ourselves when we fly too much, things like that. This is so much more influential than the terrestrial forest, but perhaps it's not really thought about enough. So we're seeing a tremendous amount of work which is going on, and Mitch also knows a tremendous amount about this, about how one can conserve, sustain, enhance broadly mangrove, seagrasses, kelp, which Michelle is a great expert. But there have also then been arguments, and this is where I think this can get really, really quite interesting, quite controversial, really welcome thoughts on this, that one can try and enhance green stuff underwater very, very broadly. And on one level, one can do this by manipulating ocean chemistry. We can put olivine, which is a silicate, we can put that underwater, and this will play with nature, possibly bad, but to enhance blue carbon, taking bad stuff out of the atmosphere, possibly good. So this is one path. So we broad nature, such as mangroves. We have manipulating ocean chemistry. We have manipulating ocean biology. And when we did this in Galway, my colleague Chris did this excellent concept of basically that can be throwing a car in the sea. Now, we might all really object to the concept of throwing a car in the sea, but actually the iron in the car, this can precipitate new growth. This might lead to more growth of green things underwater. This might be seen as a good thing. And maybe it is a good thing because it absorbs carbon dioxide. Do we know what else it does? No, there's simply not enough research around about this. So I think that just really grabbed me when I first heard this. It's something unusual. It might be actually very easy. It might solve a lot of the world's recycling problems, perhaps. It might seem to do something extremely good, but perhaps if it seems too good to be true, it is too good to be true. What questions should we be asking? What work should be done? When we did it before, some of us, we were talking about how do you get the relevant ideas in the room? Or is this not? And that's what we're really interested in looking at. And the final point in that is synthetic biology. So very, very broadly, geoengineering, playing with nature, making nature into something else, making new things, which will, again, go below the sea and absorb the carbon dioxide. Good, perhaps a bit less scary than iron bits of car in the sea. But then people, animals, they will eat these new organisms. They go back to the surface, they enter the human food chain. So A, back where we started, but B, don't really know, again, what is going to happen. And I think this is really worth stressing because, again, really welcome discussion on this. I think the debates are growing from science, from policymakers. Marcel and I often speak at events and people say, well, the answer lies in geoengineering, which I always feel slightly uncomfortable about because it's a bit like, well, I can plant a tree so I can still go on a plane. I don't really have to change my life because science will sort it. Not saying that it isn't a valuable part of the debate, but again, what questions are being asked? How much are we interrogating that? And Michelle's slide, which will be transferred the slides at 8 part of them. So I'm going to switch my laptop here. Michelle's contribution on blue carbon, important contribution to wild and cultivated blue carbon, particularly looking from the seaweed and kelp perspectives. Annual sequestration potential from microalgal cultivation is estimated to be, I'm going to confess, I don't know what this means, 0.088 teragram C per year. Is that a lot? No one knows. Excellent. This is fine. Let us proceed.
We got some nods.
Okay. This is based on the global production of 35 million tons of microalgae from cultivation. We have an upper estimate of 11% of net primary production sequestered to sediments and deep water systems, and 11% based on natural kelp bed systems. So we have 11% for both, but Michelle also says that carbon flows in aquaculture systems numbers significant differences when compared to natural systems. So we have some big difference between the aquaculture, the businesses which are coming in, again, which can go tremendous good for economies, but it's different from what would happen in a natural system. But seaweeds leak carbon as they grow, and biomass is often removed. And if we take the biomass out, we remove the carbon again. So we're seeing risks from that as well. And we are seeing some elements of interrogation of this. We're seeing conclusions from Michelle that food is leaking carbon, whether it's grown or cultivated. We simply don't know enough about how much is coming out, particularly when we're looking at cultivated biomass. There's a bit of an idea for wild beds of kelp and algae, but still very much under development. And I think this is really important, again, because this can be seen as a great answer. Nothing is an answer in itself. And the jury is still out on the extent to which one can sink cultivated biomass as a way of capturing carbon. Now, this isn't sinking cars. This is working with nature, but it's still unclear exactly what is going to happen yet. And there are, from a different angle, also welcome discussion on this. There's a whole view, blue carbon credits, all other side of micro carbon credit trading, particularly under Kyoto Protocol. Broadly, the idea, as long as someone doesn't fly, as long as someone sells the tax credits, that's okay. Other people can carry on as normal. This is kind of how I see this. This is a trade. It's not a justification. It doesn't remove the problems, I think. And Michelle's view is certain that the science to back this up is lacking. And then finally, still okay on time. When we were in Barcelona, the colleagues from our project explored a lot of work that they are doing in relation to aquaculture. And this is against a view which is being sent back by many international bodies about the concept of there being able to have 50% of human protein from aquaculture by, I think it's by 2050. So this is a goal that people are working toward. This can be seen as highly great to address starvation, address responses to climate change, an awful lot of good things which can come out of that. But what do we really think of this? I spend a lot of time in the west of Scotland, there's aquaculture farms there. There's a lot of concern. The Frankenfish debate is always kind of being thrown around. The scientists with which we're working are doing a tremendous amount of work to ensure that aquaculture can be done with as little waste as possible, to minimise escape, to have regard to fish welfare, to address disease, to try to work in with green energy as well. They're trying to engage with this from a precautionary approach. So again, some of you might be extremely familiar with this, but very broadly, in essence in life, standard approach is once we find something's bad, we will stop it. And precautions like we don't have time to wait for the evidence to find that this is really bad. And we see this in relation to health, we see this in relation to the environment. So the view that if something seems particularly risky, we'll just stop this. And this is what's happened in relation to the EU, for example, in relation to some aspects of GM. It's very controversial, depending on your business, depending on the perspective that you have. But I think it is very entrenched, and it's something that's being seen as particularly important in aquaculture. One thing we see, which is raised here, and which we also saw a bit in relation to Galway, is the debate about something being nature-based. So this can be seen as great. And certainly if it's nature-based rather than sort of totally artificially based, this might seem very appealing. But simply because something is nature-based, perhaps it's supposed to be the olivine type of situation, it doesn't necessarily mean it is risk-free. Perhaps it doesn't mean that one shouldn't still be interrogating up to a point. So this is, I think, a really interesting angle for debate, and how can one sustain efficiency and sustainability in aquaculture, which is a provider of many jobs, and which can lead to be growing a really big answer to international food security. So those were the three types of science which I used to introduce. I'm just going to put this up to kind of get you thinking for a moment. Those are three types of things we're working on in the Blueremediomics project, with very much trying to ensure we are doing no significant harm and meeting all ethical requirements, but also really interested to work out and to use those to inform our discussions here and elsewhere around Europe. What does it really mean to do no significant harm? What questions should we be asking? I've mentioned, for example, quite a lot about giving jobs. Should this matter? Should this really be part of the point? Or what else should we perhaps be thinking about? So in due course, after the biscuits, we're going to come back and we're going to reflect about whether some of these things or some of the other things we might touch on might be seen as a big bad fix, and should we be doing something to manage them more effectively, or indeed how might we be really trying to encourage things, not to take too limiting an approach to what is going on. But for now, I am going to stop and you are going to work your magic